Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Day one of the NFL draft just concluded, and I want to talk about my losers from what I saw based on tonight because this draft got kind of wonky, especially in the middle of the draft. And we just had some teams that did some things that we didn't think that we were going to see tonight, but we saw it all. I mean, trade ups, trade downs, different scenarios, players taking reaches for certain players and certain positions, which we're all going to talk about. But I want to start at number 6. Because we see the Arizona Cardinals in this spot. They got Paris Johnson. This was the guy that Kyler Murray wanted. But you see who's not in that spot. And that's the Detroit Lions. The first team who really made a massive trade back. And they're at this number 12 spot. Now, Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't get it. I don't understand why you trade out of this position when you could have got a Witherspoon, when you could have got a Gonzalez, but you drafted Jahmyr Gibbs and you drafted him at 12. Now, I've been hearing about Jahmyr Gibbs. I understand he is one of the top 1 to 2, 3 running backs in this draft class, but I don't see why you take him at 12 because who's the threat? Now, Bijan, we understood Bijan at this point, at the steam that he had, he was going to be a solidified top 15 pick. I don't think you had a lot of competition for somebody to try to come and get Jahmyr Gibbs. And then to add to add fuel to the fire, to make matters worse of what you did based on positional value, you got yourself into a position here at 18. And then you took linebacker Jack Campbell. So I'm trying to get into the ideology of what Brad Holmes was doing. Now, Brad Holmes has had some drafts. He's hit some picks out of the park. I mean, to understand and to spot out the talent of the problem in James Houston, to not fall off and understand, stick with the prospect like Aiden Hutchinson, where so many other teams were on the Trayvon Walker train, were on the train of other prospects. You stuck there and got a guy who seemed like he had defensive rookie of the year potential. But this draft here, I don't feel like this is Brad Holmes. Now, we've talked all offseason about Detroit Lions. We've heard Kalijah Kancey. We've heard Jalen Carter. We've heard quarterback is the wild card. We've even heard receiver. But I don't think nobody in the Detroit Lions fan base thought that today we were going to trade out of that 6th spot where we could have got a blue chip corner. We just traded Jeff Okudah. We brought in Cameron Sutton. We brought in Emmanuel Mosley. I talked about this just this morning, and I thought you could capitalize in the NFC, where I talked about a division and a conference in general that has a window. You should be looking to win now, and today with this draft, I don't feel like you got any better. Now, I like Malcolm Rodriguez. You re-signed Alex Anzalone. I could understand Jack Campbell may be better than both of those guys. He's my favorite linebacker in the class. I like all of those guys, but thinking about it now, I wouldn't take none of them at 18. I don't care if it was Trenton Simpson. I don't care if it was Jack Campbell, Drew Sanders, Dorian Williams, any linebacker you want to name in this class, I wouldn't take them in the first round. And if anything, it would be in the late first round. When we talk about the Buffalo Bills area, a team that could be desperate for linebacker. But to take them at 18 and to take Jahmyr Gibbs at 12, you kind of left me questionable. I did not expect this from the Detroit Lions. Out of all franchises, when I thought you had a lot of steam, a lot of expectations, but I got to keep it real, this was the biggest loss tonight in the draft for me. Now, there's some other teams. I'm not just on this team. Now, it's pretty funny. The Washington Commanders. You had Christian Gonzalez on the board. You had Deonte Banks on the board. You had Joey Porter Jr. on the board. Now, I've talked with a bunch of guys. I've looked around. I've watched film on all of these guys. And I think the consensus was Emmanuel Forbes was that 5th cornerback. If we want to throw Cam Smith in there, if we want to throw Clark Phillips, any of those other corners, Julius Brent, Tyreek Stevenson, we start to get in that range. I don't think Emmanuel Forbes was in that top 4 quarterback range. I had Witherspoon, I had Gonzalez, I had Deonte Banks, and I had Joey Porter. Joey Porter is still on the board as I'm making this video. That's how wonky and how crazy this draft kind of got. Now, there's a lot of seller points with Emmanuel Forbes. Played in the SEC, which we're going to always throw that for prospects. Has some great length, even though he's only about 166 pounds, but he's 6 feet. And he possesses some great athletic ability, but I just really think one thing that stood out to me with Emmanuel Forbes, he looked kind of stiff in transition. And also talking about him too, having the ball skills, I think is a plus. But when you have that weight And it's not that he's a bad corner, it's more so when you got a Gonzalez, who I think is a polished prospect. I think could have been the first cornerback off the board. You got a Deonte Banks, who I think is a more polished prospect, who I would love to have on my team if I were in the market for a corner. And Joey Porter Jr., who we've all talked about. But you went Emmanuel Forbes. Moving him up to the second cornerback off the board left me questionable. Now, as we got further into this thing, it was a couple more teams that did a little bit of questionable things. Now, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm kind of in the middle about how I feel about this pick. I think Anton Harrison is a pretty solid player, understanding that you lost Jawan Taylor, understanding the Cam Robinson situation, what you have now. This was kind of a need for the team, because we have to add somebody, whether it be left or right tackle. And like I said, we just talked about the players who are going through situations. And Jawan Taylor, who's not a Jacksonville Jaguar anymore. But I think Anton Harrison kind of got pushed up the board for Jacksonville. I really wish they could have got Brian Branch. And it's going to be interesting to see who gets him in the second round. But this was the kind of that guy in the range. Now we talk about corners. If we're pushing somebody up our board, just like a Emmanuel Forbes, just like a Cam Smith, we have all these guys flying off the board. Who's going to come next? Because we need this position so badly that we kind of see reaches. And I think this was one of those here. I wouldn't say Anton Harrison is a terrible pick, but I really think it was other players who would have been better for them in this selection. But you need a tackle. This was kind of the best thing left, and you got to get him before he's not there. Now, DeJuan Jones is still on the board, but I think for what you're trying to do, especially with ETN trying to hit on those edges, Anton Harrison, he's not the most athletic tackle in this class, but he's good enough athletically, and he has some solid technique, can work on his play strength. I've already talked about him, but pretty solid pick. I just don't think you hit it out of the park when you had some players you could have hit out of the park with. Now, overall, I think this was a pretty solid draft. Myles Murphy to the Cincinnati Bengals, I felt kind of 50-50 about it. But the reason that I wouldn't say this is a complete loss is because the corners. Emmanuel, for all top 5 corners, I would say pretty consensus top 5 corners are off the board. We got Forbes going, Gonzalez. What happened with Gonzalez? I'm not understanding that. If anybody can let me know that in the comments, what really happened? Now, I'm going to close this video off with who I think was a big loser and why I think Bill Belichick pulled off a very veteran-savvy GM move, because he's not a GM, but sometimes he likes to do things in that room. And trading with the Pittsburgh Steelers, going back to 17, understanding your guy's still going to be there, and taking away Broderick Jones from the New York Jets, a team in your division. I loved it. I loved it. I love it. For me being that competitive guy, I'm not letting you get Broderick Jones. Even though he has to work on some hand placement, has to work on some technique, this dude is a freak of nature, and he can move for a tackle at that size. Having him with Aaron Rodgers, you're not about to pick me apart. You're not about to run for 100 yards with Breece Hall. So I'm going to play it smart. I'm going to play the role, and I'm going to be the middleman in this situation. I'm moving back. I'm letting the Steelers jump you, and they get their tackle of the future. Broderick Jones, I think that was the sweetest, most undercover move of the draft. If you caught that process during the draft, let me know that in the comments. But I really love that, seeing him do that, take away from the division, saying no to Aaron Rodgers, not today, not today, not today. And then they got Will McDonald. I think Will McDonald, as far as edge, this is kind of a tricky class because a lot of these guys I think are great run defenders, but as far as pass rush, bend around the edge, you can kind of depend on what you're looking for. Will McDonald may be higher on your board than a Myles Murphy, than a Lucas Van Ness, because he's truly that essence of a player. Talking about bend, finesse off the edge. He's not a big, powerful guy, and that's due to his build. He's not the biggest guy off the edge. And I want to know, I'm going to be interested to see how do the New York Jets use him in their scheme. Are you going to bulk him up? Or are you just going to use him how he was used at Iowa State? Because I think at Iowa State, he was used kind of out of place, and that kind of messed with his evaluation. But on the next level, he may be a guy who shines. A lot of people haven't been talking about Will McDonald in this top 15 range. I wouldn't say it's the player. I think it's the fact that you lost out on that tackle that I know you desperately wanted. New York, you've been hearing it all season. Broderick Jones, Broderick Jones, Broderick Jones. You didn't get Broderick Jones. And Bill Belichick made sure of that. So those are my losers for today. And to recap it, the Detroit Lions, we had the other losers we had. I mean, the Detroit Lions really caught my eye and they just kind of threw me off. I said Jacksonville was kind of in that iffy spot because I understand why you would make the move, but I just think it was some better players on the board. Cincinnati Bengals, they were kind of a loser, not because of the pick they made. I like Myles Murphy, but all the corners were off the board, so they're going to have to attack that in the second round. And also, yeah, I think that pretty about wraps it up. And we got the New York Jets. I think the Chicago Bears were kind of a subtle loser because I really wish you would have got Jalen Carter. Seriously. Las Vegas Raiders, I like Tyree Wilson, and I wouldn't say you're a loser. I was just kind of questionable. I was kind of questionable about that move when you had Gonzalez on the board. Deontay, I mean, it's Gonzalez. I don't understand the slip with Gonzalez. I think he's a really polished prospect. Of course, no prospect is perfect, but in a draft that's kind of on the weaker side, I think he was one of those more polished guys. And you went Tyree Wilson. Now you still got Chandler Jones, who's getting older. Still got Max Crosby, who you paid. And outside of that, now I never get mad about an edge rushing player, and that's even with the Nolan Smith situation with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles fans, you should feel really good about that pick because it's a rotation nowadays. We never have a guy who's playing every down as the edge. Even Myles Garrett, TJ Watt, sometimes they get rotated out. And these guys, Tyree Wilson is going to be in a heavy rotation. He's going to be a starter, impact player in a division where you have to get after these quarterbacks, but you also got to stop them with corners. And I think you could have went corner. So that's another subtle loser for me. But overall, wrapping it up, we're going to drop a video talking about the winners tomorrow. There's a lot of winners in this draft, and I think a lot of teams played it smart, but these were some of the teams that I think didn't play it so smart. And let me know what you think about this in the comments. As always, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the content, but until now, we out.